Gary's joining from home.
Nicola.
I'd call the work session of the Isabel County Board of Commissioners to order. Stand for the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Embry,
Here.
Commissioner Jalzinski,
Here.
Commissioner Engler.
Here.
Commissioner Marino,
Here.
Swaney,
Here.
all present, Mr. Chairman, except Commissioner Hutchinson.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Commissioner Hutchinson is excused this evening. So first up, we'll start out with approval of the agenda. We'll start with general public comments. We have no presentations or special reports. We'll have a report from the county administrator. We have no appointments to boards or commissions. Committee reports, Finance and Administration Committee.
Finance Administration Committee is all set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any items you would like removed
Yes.
from the?
I would like to request that item number 7, the consideration of the request to hire an accounts payable clerk at a different pay grade, be removed.
Thank you. We don't have any business under Criminal Justice and County Affairs, Human Resources and Public Works Committee.
Public Works Committee is all set, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Marino, do we have any intergovernmental affairs this evening?
We do not.
We don't have any intergovernmental affairs, no administrative controller issues, no unfinished business, no new business. We'll have general public comment again towards the end of the meeting and then announcements. So with that, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Support, Embry.
Moved and supported. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Very good. We have an agenda and next up is general public comment. Anyone for general public comment?
Evening.
Good evening, County Lead Bills, Union Township Liaison. I just wanted to remind everybody, we're having a ribbon cutting for the new fitness court on the 7th at 10 a.m.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else for general public comment? Seeing no one for general public comment, we'll keep moving along. We have no presentations or special reports. Isabella County Administrator Controller Report.
So normally I usually only talk or speak or report at the second meeting of the month, but I had a couple of things that I need to get out there, especially to the board. Remember, Leadership Luncheon is next Tuesday, September 12th, and we need to know that we need to let the city know who's coming. So if you can RSVP to me within the next couple of days, I would appreciate that. Also, you've got the Michigan Association of Counties Annual Conference coming up October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. We've already got at least one commissioner that I know of signed up to attend. I think the early bird goes through the end of this week yet. So if you could let us know your plans to attend, we'll get you signed up. You don't have to meet the early bird, but of course we certainly try to do that. One of the things we had been doing is trying to find a new location for our November meeting. And we have since, in the process of trying to do that on election day, have learned that this room will be available to us for your board meeting on election night. This will not be a polling location. So much ado about nothing, but in case that's on your radar, I wanted to let you know it will be a non-issue. Johnson Controls performance contracting contract will be coming before your for your consideration at the next meeting. I know you've still got lots of questions there. So I just kind of want to let you know, they've been providing us information. I've gotten that out to you. Certainly, we won't be pressured into anything, but want to just give you a heads up that will be coming up for consideration. The next round. Legal has gotten through that contract. And then just two quick things. As Vice Chairman Jelezinski did amend the agenda and pull off item number 7, unfortunately, the candidate we were going to hire as the AP clerk has taken another position. So even though we try to hire at higher than start, sometimes we can't compete with those things. So I want to let you know that, and I just want to tell her thank you for all of the help that she did give us. And I know recently she helped out county clerks with adding all those juror pays by hand. And she's been fantastic. So I just wanted to say thank you. Last thing, October 6th, we are having a potluck, something that Heather coordinated for us. She won't be here for that, but I wanted to remind everybody about that. So quick report from me, just a bunch of reminders, really. Thank you.
Sprader Frost, thank you. We don't have no appointments to boards and commissions. Brings us down to committee reports. Finance and Administration Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our first item is consider ratifying and placing on file the August 11, 2023 invoice list in the amount of $321,148.36. The August 18, 2023 invoice list in the amount of $1,447,016.80. The August 25th, 2023 invoice list in the amount of $122,877.94. In the adjustment list dated August 31st, 2023. We've had several opportunities to look over the invoice list that we had before us tonight. On the August 11th, these are all customary charges, so contracts, annual fees, monthly examiner contract. I think there was nothing. There's the July architectural services for the correctional facility. That was a little bit, we're seeing that more often, but that was $22,866.83. Some work on the drains. And we had Walgreens got a tax tribunal lower valued. So there was a return to Walgreens company from the treasurer. Any questions on either the list or the background information on the other bills for August 11th? Seeing none, we'll move on to August 18. Again, we have things that we see time and time again. I don't think there's anything in any of these consumers energy. We have repair of a truck at the recycling, manpower at weekly contracts, labor for recycling. The only one that's different here is game time, $119,180.27, and that's for new playground equipment at Herrick Park. I think this is probably one of the last playgrounds I put in before leaving the county for other pastures. And then we have some childcare services provided by Washtenaw County. Any questions on this list or any of the background information?
From me.
All right, we'll move on to the August 25th list. I don't know what happened here. There's only 3 bills that exceeded the 5,000. And it's drain work. We had again contracted labor for recycling. And we had some, well, this one here, Deerfield Park Pavilion, labor and materials, $22,807. I suspect there's some renovation going on at the pavilion over there. Questions on those 3 items or in the background information? All right, we'll move on to the adjustment list. My phone here. Oh, thank you. So the adjustment list would be changes to the actual list that we've just reviewed. And most of these are paid early to get a discount. Like for Gordon Food Services, or to pay early to avoid a late fee, because our schedules don't always line up with the vendors that provide a service. So, and that's usually Consumers Energy. There's always a few minor adjustments because sales tax was originally put on and then removed. And some computation errors probably in mileage. But I didn't see anything that that was very concerning in that list. Questions on that list? All right, we'll move these on then to tonight's meeting.
Consider approving the Isabella County 2024 holiday schedule as presented during our staff meetings. I think this was brought up that we should consider adding Juneteenth to our schedule of holidays, paid holidays. Something we discussed there briefly, and something that we decided to move forward from administration and finance. I think it's the right thing to do. You have a
Just to clarify, we have had Juneteenth a couple of times. I think you're thinking ahead to the personnel policy changes.
Oh, maybe I am.
Where we're striking
Part-time.
some language, not to excite anyone. No new holidays, sorry. We'll talk about the Juneteenth change when we get to the policy.
There you go.
Really, these are the same holidays we've had for the last couple of years. Just changing the date to 2024. Really nothing out of the ordinary here. No Saturday or Sunday, I don't think, holiday. So that was kind of nice. We didn't have to do a lot of figuring out when we would observe it. So pretty straightforward.
Change the date, moving forward.
Our third item is consider approving the easement for electrical facilities between Isabella County and Consumers Energy Company for the Isabella County Sheriff's Office and Correctional Facility, and authorize the board chair to sign the same. A lot of paper, but all this basically does is it widens the current easement, which I think is 15 feet to 30 feet, 15 foot from either side of the power line. Is that correct, or am I?
Actually, the original easement and the existing easement copies are in here following the staff report before the proposed ones. I think the existing easement is already 15 foot on either side of center line, so it is already 30 feet. This just adds, unfortunately, the original easement only allowed for the electric line across the property, if you will, kind of like east to west. It didn't allow for the existing power to come and connect from the south. And so that's what this easement does. Fortunately, it does sound like this isn't holding things up. We will have this in place for when the work has to happen. But thank you to somebody who identified that this was missing.
And the good news is it only cost the county $1.
That is right.
Questions on the easement? We'll move this into our meeting tonight.
Sure. Next item is to consider approving on-call stipends for prosecuting attorneys at a pay rate of $550 per week and $200 per federal holiday for fiscal year 2024. And we have prosecuting attorney Barbary here to further enlighten us.
Good evening, commissioners.
Good evening.
I wanted to just start the discussion out by talking about what it is that kind of got us here, and then talk a little bit about the proposal. Certainly the reason for the request has been, the catalyst for this request was the MIDC instituting Standard 8. And Standard 8 essentially requests that there be created some sort of parity and or some sort of a pay increase to public defenders. And those that provide indigent defense. In doing so, one of the things that caused some concern to me was that there are distinct differences between the duties of a public defender and the duties of a prosecutor. One of those is the on-call stipend, or one of those is the on-call duty. And trying to look at some of the duties and differences in the things and the services that we provide, I looked at it from the standpoint of what is it that a prosecutor does that's distinctly different. Now, certainly we all provide a service, a legal service to the individuals that we represent. But one of the things that was easy to draw a difference on was this premise of being on call, this idea that a prosecutor is on call every week, every day of the year, holidays, nights, weekends, et cetera. Some of the duties of the on-call prosecutor include trying to review search warrants at any hour of the night. On the weekends and on holidays, it's our job to initiate a complaint and or a warrant and give somebody an interim bond. So while our counterparts and are not necessarily working on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, our office has somebody staffed to come in and go through a complaint, review a police report, and provide somebody an interim bond, or provide somebody or serve somebody with protective conditions to further protect the victim of a crime from the defendant. So looking at the on-call obligation, that was the easiest way to differentiate the duties of a prosecutor and a public defender. There's certainly other things that we do that they don't, but there's things that they do that we don't. And we recognize that. So the proposal before the board, in essence, provides a one-time stipend for the calendar year or fiscal year 2024. And that would be at a rate of $550 per week, or $200 per federal holiday. The basis for this, or the other research that was done on this, showed that every county throughout the state has some sort of, not every, I should say, but many counties throughout the state have some sort of an on-call stipend or an on-call pay. And that varies depending on the size of the county. If it's a smaller county where, say, there's just one prosecutor, no assistants, they did not typically have any type of an on-call stipend or on-call reimbursement. In the proposal, I mentioned some of the other counties that do have different programs for their on-call compensation. And those vary in range from comp time to a set salary. One thing that I think is important to note about the proposal is that it would not impact my salary. It would not be applicable to me as an elected official. It's obviously been brought up before, and in many respects, when I ran for the position, I knew what the position paid. I knew that the duties of the job required that you were going to be on call. So I don't think it would be fair now to come in and ask for a stipend for me to be on call. I think this is appropriate for people that are below me and the assistant prosecutors that assist on the weekends and on their nights and holidays, because it's a way to differentiate the duties between what we do and the public defender's office, in the sense that they're not necessarily required to be on call on those nights, weekends, and holidays. And I can say to our prosecutors, you are being compensated for that time that you're on call, and you're not being able to be with your families or get out of town and things of that nature. Now, in addition to that, I think it's important to note that this proposal is only geared for fiscal year 2024. It does not reclassify any of the current positions on staff. So that would be something that we could evaluate at the time of a wage study. As the board has discussed, this would only include a one-time stipend for the year fiscal 2024. And the money to pay for the proposal as proposed, in essence, has been created by a windfall, although I wouldn't call it a huge boon, due to the savings that we've had by being short-staffed in fiscal year 2023. We anticipate to continue to be short-staffed into fiscal year 2024, and it's currently September 5th, and we don't have any prospects for hire at this time. So we at least anticipate into October that we'll be short-staffed again. So there'll be continued savings that way. Not necessarily how you want to save money, but savings nonetheless. So in many ways, this is a creative solution born out of necessity to try to both reward in some respects, but also keep the staff that we have on staff currently, and to maintain the staff that we have and not lose people based on salary and wages. That succinctly represents the proposal, maybe not so succinctly, but nonetheless, I'd entertain any questions that the board may have.
Prosecuting Attorney Barbary, I noticed in the financial impact portion of the staff report, it indicated that it would be roughly a cost of $36,470 for the year 2024. And currently, as of what, August or September, you're $67,000 under budget. Correct?
$67,000 under budget just in salary and wages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're saying it's gonna cost roughly 36,000, a little over that for the entire year 2024. And on the flip side of that, because of the staffing shortages you saved $67,000 to date. And will
Right.
continue to save over the next 2 months.
And that's due both into staffing shortages and when we've replaced staff, we've lost people at a step 6 and brought people in at a step 1. So we've lost some of the legacy costs that way as well.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
So you said that this would be just a single year and we're looking at possibly revisiting it in some form in a year with the reclassification study. Good.
It makes most sense not to tie anyone to this in perpetuity, but to allow this to be revisited next year, either to be incorporated through the wage study. Perhaps there's a reclassification of these positions, A or B, it's renewed, but considered part of the overall compensation of the position. It's not my intent to create something that wouldn't be able to be reevaluated in the future.
No other questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Do appreciate the creative approach to relieving some of the stress on staff. I think there's very few county departments that have that. Prosecuting attorney, Parks and Recreation during the summer oftentimes has people get drawn in. But in this day and age, it's so hard to attract staff and retain staff that I think this is very much warranted.
No other questions? We'll move this to tonight's regular work session. All right, with number 7. Nope. Number 5, consider approving the reclassification of the Chief Assistant Prosecuting Attorney's salary to a pay grade 18. And for this change to be incorporated and reflected in the fiscal year 2024 budget to be effective October 1st, 2023. Again, Prosecuting Attorney Barbary is here to fill us in.
So the proposal before the board, as it pertains to my chief assistant position, currently in the drafted budget, it has my chief assistant on salary at a 17.5 and his subordinate, my principal trial attorney on salaried at 17.5 as well. Essentially, the request before the board is to raise my chief assistant salary to an 18. There is historical precedence for doing that, where a subordinate would be paid the same and or less than a supervisor. And so that's my request at this time. I understand it's not necessarily the position, or at least I understand that there's some apprehension about reclassifying any position prior to a wage study. But the reason for doing this, I think, is again, just out of frankly necessity from the standpoint of how do you tell somebody that they're your supervisor without them being compensated for that supervisor role. I would entertain any questions on that. I should indicate that the financial impact is $6,000 in the fiscal year 2024. And in the event that a wage study were to be performed and that were to be altered at that time or changed, it would simply be a red line feature in that position. And we're looking at about a potential risk of $6,200.
Question.
I'll give credit to Commissioner Swaney, who at the last meeting said, every once in a while, you've got an exception to the rule. And I think this is one of the exceptions to the rule that needs to be considered. Because we have made adjustments in the past for this same purpose.
Mr. Swaney, did you have something?
No.
I'd just like to piggyback on what Vice Chair commented on.
I agree with everything. Your logic is sound. I agree 100%. While it may be true that it is legitimately a one-off situation and could be the exception that, proves the rule, if you will. My concern, as I mentioned before, is if we open that box. That's my only concern. And that was why I mentioned in committee that I'd like to wait until we do get the wage study complete and then potentially look at retroactivity. But that was my point at that point. But I still felt it was important that, again, I'm glad you guys voted to move it forward for the rest of you to consider. So I think that is important as well. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Number 6, consider adopting the recommended language revisions to policy 101 Isabella County Personnel Manual for non-represented employees, section F, holidays, and section H, paid time off, to take effect immediately upon adoption. Administrator Frost, would you please take this?
Absolutely, Vice Chairman. So if you go to your non-represented employees personnel manual, page 101-12, the change to the holiday section, very straightforward. We're just striking the words Monday nearest before June 19th. When we first had this holiday added, I think it was, excuse me, on a Sunday. So the policy had to say that. And then the next time we had it, it was on a Monday. So the policy wasn't necessarily wrong, but going forward, we just need to strike those 2 words to make policy appropriate. A couple more pages, 101-15 in the policy is the page where the other changes are taking place to accumulation of PTO hours. The reason this change is coming about is because at the last department head meeting, we talked about how the prior changes to the PTO policy would play out with moving the PTO payout from traditionally January to October. Remember, this board approved that change last December. So now looking forward to actually making those payouts, we had a lot of questions from departments about administratively, how would that work? And there's an accumulation cap, and is that changing? And so we really talked through, I think, brought a better policy forward. This still keeps in place those caps for the payout. How many hours that we pay out, that's not changing. It's still capped at 112.58 hours for non-exempt employees and 120.12 hours for exempt employees. In addition to that, we had an accumulation cap that always was attached in January of each calendar year, where employees could only bring into a new calendar year 225.5 hours. We are now, per policy, putting in better language to move that to the beginning of the fiscal year, but we're giving employees a year to do that. In recent years, we've opted to do additional PTO payouts. I don't think that that's necessarily necessary, as long as we move that accumulation cap and don't have it effective in October to allow people enough time to use their time. So then it'll just transition from January to October, and then going forward from October of 24, we shouldn't have any need to extend anything or leave anything or have anything additional. We should have a smooth policy at that point. So really, that's what the new language accomplishes. We did that while keeping the old language in there, so that if anyone picked up the policy, they could follow it. It wouldn't be like, hey, why was this paid out in January one year? We do it in October, kind of helps to keep the story. So that is the limitation of the changes before you right now. Any questions?
Commissioner Embry.
I appreciate department head staff. We had a lot of conversation around this because we did not want to penalize anyone for making the change that the board chose to make. So again, I appreciate the creativity of members of the staff and administration for working this out so that it seems like most everybody will be happy. right? We really tried to make it work for everybody. So again, thank you to everybody.
Any other comments? We'll move this on then to tonight's meeting.
All right, number 8. Consider accepting and placing on file the fiscal year 2023 third quarter financial report as presented. Madam Administrator, I'm going to turn this one over to you as well, I believe.
Absolutely.
Oh, can I say one thing? I do appreciate the fact that you made it 11-month. I know it was supposed to be third quarter. And I tried to bring that out as a fault. I appreciate the fact that you just didn't do it for the third quarter and gave me 2-month-old information. I appreciate the fact that you made it for 11 months. So it's up to date. I appreciate that. So thank you. For that.
Thank you. It does seem to be more meaningful than bringing you the June 30th report. We missed it. We brought forth the budget amendments. We always try to do the quarterly budget amendments before the quarterly report. That way they're already in the numbers when you see the report. We did the third quarter budget amendments. We just forgot to do the supplemental report. So we're bringing it to you late, and as Commissioner Embry noted, we made it pretty much an 11-month report instead of 9 because it's sitting as we sit here, it's just a lot more meaningful. So front page revenues, as far as if this was the 9-month ending report, this would look fantastic because normally we don't have any taxes by that point. Because normally it is through June 30, our taxes don't get levied until July 1. So normally there's no taxes on this report, but you can see as of August 24th, we're about 22% as far as our revenue for taxes. That should not be alarming to you because again, we just started bringing those in and we'll continue to bring those in even after fiscal year and push those back as appropriate. None of the wind turbine revenue has made this report, but I know in finance, we were told that DTE just paid their personal property tax bill. So we should see that at 100% soon. Licenses and permits are lagging some because of the timing of things. That's a revenue that still really isn't performing really strong after COVID, but as you can see in the mix of everything, it's one of our smaller revenues, so we are not too concerned about that. Federal and state is very inflated for the current fiscal year, right? And that is because of that just over $8 million of ARPA revenue that we recognized a few months ago of our $10 million loss revenue, so that there was no fear of getting that clawed back. So that's why you see that big influx of federal and state revenue. Charges for services really are going strong. That is lagging a little bit due to timing. Fines and forfeitures are doing really, really well. I think we had a big forfeiture this year, not something that we would budget for ongoing. Interest and rents are doing fantastically, and that's not because we've raised anyone's rents, right? It's because the interest is performing so strong from what we budgeted. I'm gonna go down to delinquent tax revolving. We do have still in our amended budget that we'll use $200,000 of delinquent tax funds in our general fund budget, but that will be reversed out in your fourth quarter budget amendments that will be coming in the next round. Transfer in from commissary or other, the other portion and what has caused us to go over 100% in that line, if you will. It's just under $30,000 that we used to budget for. We used to budget it a different way, and I don't want to cause any panic because we still do budget these amounts for veterans relief. It's just we don't do it in an outside fund. We used to budget in a fund called Soldiers and Sailors Relief and Veterans Trust Fund to the tune of about $30,000 a year. And when that didn't get utilized, it would stay in that fund and it would just sit in that fund. Now we've started to budget that in our Veterans Affairs Department in general fund. So what we did was took a transfer in from the leftover monies, if you will, that were in those outside funds. And later on in the report, we'll see where that ties in to the Veterans Department and general fund. CPL fund, that's where the clerk is allowing a transfer in from the concealed pistol license fund to pay for a portion of one of her employees. Our register of deeds automation fund is the same type of thing that those come in to cover part of a cost of an employee. And indirect costs, as we talked a little bit in finance, those are a little less than budgeted as MIDC is changing things from how they originally handled the indigent defense grant. And indirect costs, they're not just sending us indirect costs, they're actually applying 10% of payroll. So 10% of our wages and benefits that we report quarterly, they're taking a 10% amount off of that, and that's what they're sending us for indirect costs. For the indigent defense grant, we don't use our cost allocation plan to charge indirect costs like we do our other departments, because MIDC allows us to charge that or 10% of wages and benefits, and it's more lucrative for us to charge the 10%. So that's what we do. But instead of just giving it to us all up front, they are doing it more on a reimbursement basis now.
Yep.
So more to come on that for sure. So if we go to, let's go to the next page, expenditures. Really not a lot of stories here. Information management is over budget, and that has to do with the phone system that happened really early on in the fiscal year. So you'll see that coming forward in the fourth quarter budget amendment. Central services is really close to 100%. Central services is our postage department. It's all postage for a lot of the departments throughout the county. And we'll analyze that to see if we need to add more in the budget amendment. But before fiscal year end, I think it's delinquent tax fund does a transfer to cover postage that they use from that, and to the tune of $10,000. I tried to push it to 12 at finance, but Kathleen wouldn't let me. So $10,000 still yet to come from that fund for postage. Really on that page, the only other thing over budget is marine safety. That's not alarming. What we do at the beginning of budget season is choose an amount of hours that the deputies are likely to have for the Lake Isabella. I'm sorry, for the marine safety at Coldwater Lake generally. And when those come back at the end of the year, then we divvy them out, and we're over a little bit, and those are coming to an end pretty soon. So that'll be included in your fourth quarter budget amendment if we need to bring that amendment to the board. Excellent. Other expenditures, your departments are doing really, really fantastically. Next page, I would point out the Veterans Affairs. They are at only 75%. And if you see that under balance, that amount left over, that has to do with that 30,000 that we're now budgeting in general fund instead of the outside fund. So I just kind of wanted to close the loop. Thank you, Melissa, for educating me on that. Every other department is well within budget. Overall expenditures at about 82% for your 11-month report. So that's got to feel really good. The last page of that report is always some of our major funds: Parks and Rec, Front of the Court, Central Dispatch, Commission on Aging, Child Care Fund, inspections and recycling. They're all doing fairly well. Recycling revenues are lagging. That has a little bit to do with timing and a little bit more to do with commodity prices not staying up there where we started the year. Their expenditures are going strong, but we've analyzed it and don't believe at this point that we need to transfer more monies to them out of general fund. The fund balance at the MRF is strong enough, but we'll take another look at that, and if it needs to be included, it'll be included in your fourth quarter budget amendment. Are there any questions about your 11-month ending report?
Just a comment from me. Again, it's 11-month report. So when I look at expenses for each department, ideally it should fall 91, 92%. When I look over to the far right and I start looking at expenses for judicial at 81.75, general government at 82.92, again, that's well under the 91, 92% that you would customarily see after 11 months. So if you broke it down in 11-month increments, they should fall right around that 91, 92% range. So again, compliments to the folks that help run this county. Yep, everyone's doing a great job. So thank you for that.
Next item is 10-year financial forecast update. I know in committee, it was announced that it was improved that at the end of our 10 years, we're no longer 19 million, now only 14 million. I don't know if that's good news or not. However, I did ask, the bottom line says ending fund balance. Not all those are available to us, so we need to focus on, is this a change? No, it's not.
I'll pass the rest of it.
Shouldn't be a change from.
The one I have, good.
In case you didn't bring yours, or I think there are extra copies up here. Nope, the extra copies are here. If anybody wants one, follow along.
So I'm just going to finish my comment, then I'm going to turn it over to Madam Administrator. The fund balance unreserved is what we have available to use for our general fund. And that still does show almost $17.5 million in the red at the end of our 10-year forecast. So we still have a lot of work to do, work that we can't get completed unless we do get some additional revenues from a millage that we're proposing for next year. Madam Administrator, would you like to take over and tell us what the changes were from the last report?
Certainly. Again, no changes from Tuesday. This is the one that would have went to the finance committee on Tuesday. But changes to what you're holding from the last time we brought this before you. One of the biggest things you'll notice we pulled out is in the revenues. We pulled out the transfer in from delinquent tax revolving. It's just a bigger conversation and a bigger unknown, right, of some of the things looming there. So we've heard you loud and clear and removed that. Starting in a 2027 fiscal 27, we have removed the MRF appropriation and taken that out of the transfers out. So you'll see those transfers out go from 1.8 down to pretty much 1.5 in 2027. And that's what, in part, at least that's what is driving that. We did build in, I know culturally, this is something we've been wanting to do. There's the additional $250,000 for capital outlay that is built in here. That expenditure line for capital outlay, we pretty much follow facility director Shoemaker's capital improvement plan that he gives us, plus the $250,000 that we want to do each year on top of that, right? As we know, in fiscal 24, the proposed budget is reducing that down to $150,000. So, but we didn't reduce it to 150 in 24 and keep it there, right? That's what's in our proposed budget for 24. We built it back up in 25. Same kind of concept with information systems, IT infrastructure, right? And capital needs. We don't know what's going to be coming, but we know something is pretty much every year. So this forecast also has $50,000 a year for capital improvements, specifically for IT. starting also in 2025. That was something else, actually, starting in 24, because the fiscal 24 budget includes $50,000 for IT capital. In 2024, we did remove about $2.4 million of capital for that performance contracting project, if it happens, right? So if it doesn't happen, then basically what we would have to build in is did the HVAC project at 2.4 million, we would have to build in 0.4 million of ARPA revenues.
Yep.
Sure would. There we go. I'm back. Starting in fiscal 25, when sheriff will be at his new facility, knock on wood. We've built in an increase in for salaries and for operations. We've always been under the understanding that potentially more staff will be needed in that new facility. So we've increased salaries by about 15% and operations by 10%, starting in that fiscal 25. So you'll see, you can see the increase. Fiscal 24 includes the $3.6 million that is the general fund portion of the expenditures on the sheriff's office and correctional facility project. We'll talk about that next in the proposed budget discussion about building that into the 24 budget. It was already built into the forecast. Also in the forecast is the fiscal 25 portion of that project that general fund will have to pay. This is, remember, everything over the $41.5 million that we're borrowing. This is the county's portion that is above that, right? So we've built that in fiscal 24 and 25 in your forecast. That's in the transfers out in your expenditures. So if you want to point to where that is, you can see where that is. I think as far as changes or things built in, that is everything. Salary accelerators in the forecast range from 2.5%, 2%. I think we're 2.5%. I think it's 2.5% at first, and then 2% the other years going forward. Healthcare increasing at 5% each year in the forecast. Operations 1.5%. And we talked at finance about increasing those, increasing salary accelerators in the forecast to maybe 3.5%, 3%, getting that up there, and increasing the operational accelerator 1.5% just because isn't too realistic.
No.
Another thing we talked about in finance was really looking at this. Treasurer Pickens was there too, and Kathleen, of course, which is always very nice. And we talked about at what point would we run into a cash flow problem, and fiscal 26 seems to be probably likely when we would run into cash flow problems, not receiving our revenues until last quarter of our fiscal year, right? And so Finance Chairman Jelezinski did talk about maybe building in the costs of interest, right? The cost of maybe borrowing money. If before we're out of money, cash flow is going to be an issue. So if we need to borrow money to satisfy cash flow needs, then we should be building in the cost of interest payments to borrow those monies. So that is what's been built in, and some of the things that we talked about at finance of how to improve it a little more going forward.
Couple of things that I think are on the horizon. One, if we're going to do the wage study, I expect there's going to be some costs to that. And the other thing that we don't know about yet is what liabilities we may have as people seek redress on delinquent tax fund return. Treasurer's office just kind of gave us a scenario of a worst case to a best case scenario, and we're probably looking, depending on how many people seek that return and surplus, what amount is going to hit our general fund to take care of that issue. I appreciate this tool.
Mhm.
It does let us know what our challenges are, and we need to work towards it.
Quick question. What was, sorry, the increase in salaries from 23 to 24? So at the start of October 2024, what was the increase in salary? I see a number, but
3% should be, right?
3,
Forecast.
yeah, a year from now. Right, so we're getting, we'll just assume that we're gonna have a reclassification study for $80,000 to $100,000. We're gonna have that come in probably right before the budget for next year, 2024. And I don't see it as something that we can really sit on. I just want to make a point here to all our commissioners that when we get this reclassification study in, that says that we need to increase our salaries and benefits by 5 to 15%. Who knows what's going to come into? We've got to have an appetite for that.
Correct.
Even though we're facing, a $5 million deficit for that year. We cannot fail another reclassification study. And I don't think that the company that did our classification study failed us. It's how we take that classification study and what we do with it and what we expect from it. So, come a year from now, we've got to have an appetite to really bite into this and do right by our staff.
Yeah.
So, I don't think we're looking at a 3% increase after that study.
Yeah, just to comment, and I think finance and administration, we did talk about potentially 1.5, 2 million, a little over $2 million that could be increasing our salaries and benefits. So we did discuss that, and that should be a part of our budget for 2024. So I agree. We need to factor that in.
Well said, gentlemen. Any other questions?
I agree with what Commissioner Swaney just said, that when we do that wage and classification study, we can't sit on another study like we did the last one. We've got to move on it. And it certainly, without that factored in, we're still looking at deficit spending in 2028 and depletion of our fund balance, unreserved fund balance. So it illustrates the need for an increase in the
Revenue.
Yeah. We have few options. Really. This is pretty black and white. It paints a bleak picture. So we either go to the voters or taxpayers and ask for a millage increase to help cover this, or we borrow the money and pay the interest, which will cause us to have to make even greater adjustments to the services that we provide for the people of this county. So again, we don't have too many options. Right. Wages and benefits will increase. That's just the way it is. And even 5% might be a little optimistic. We're looking at a 9% increase in benefits this year. That's healthcare is a volatile industry. You have spikes and valleys all the time, but 5% might be a little optimistic there.
Oh,
I'm not sure that we can borrow our way out of this situation.
No.
Maybe we can short term for cash flow.
Long-term.
But for long term, we either need to come up with the new revenues or it's going to be painful. We'll have to make internal cuts to balance the budget because we can't deficit spend. But one way or the other, we'll do that. That's what the voters expect us to do.
they'll give us the mandate.
Other comments, questions for the administration on the 10-year forecast? We have the information. It doesn't move forward.
Thank you. Are we done? Does that conclude us?
Still have a fiscal year proposed budget discussion.
I forgot.
Was it is.
Okay.
So we'll move on then to the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget discussion. We had a good presentation of this and we've had a chance to look at it. I don't know if there's been any modifications since it was presented to us.
No, sir, but I want to talk about some of the modifications that will happen before adoption in 2 weeks because of the conversations that we've been having at finance and because of some of the things on your agenda tonight. So when we just talked about the forecast, it's something we have always built in the forecast we know is coming, our portion of the sheriff's office and correctional facility project, right? And this board has committed, as we sit here, over $3.4 million of its fund balance to the project, knowing it was over the 41.5, knowing we've got a portion. And when I brought forth the recommended budget, it was my suggested at the time, we know we're going to have expenses. We'll just bring forward a budget amendment at the time and ask the board to increase revenues out of the use of fund balance, increase expenditures at the time we have those payments. Treasurer Pickens was able to review the proposed budget as we've had it out there for reviewing before tonight's public hearing. And he contacted me to say, it's really probably it's best practice to build those known expenditures into the budget. And so we will be building those into the 23 budget. Our estimate, we have cash flows on every month of the project, what we expect them to be. And that's all we can do at this point is enter an educated guess. In 2024, those expenditures of general fund portion should be $3,631,130. So that will increase the expenditure by 3.6 million. Remember, in the current proposed, we've got about a $1.5 million use of fund balance. So that's going to go up to about 5.1 million. Okay. If the board approves, and I will not guess on what you're going to do with a few agenda items on your regular meeting tonight that could affect fiscal 24 amounts, right? Your on-call pay and your wages in the PA's office. If those were to be incorporated in fiscal 24, we talked in finance, not about saying, yes, prosecuting attorney Barbary, we approve and agree and go find the money. Understand if those things are approved, it would increase the fiscal 24 budget, right? We're not going to trade. I think we called it trading one burden for another in fiscal. The premise right now is that those would increase the budget. So if all of that were approved, I want you to understand where your general fund budget would be. It's a bigger dollar amount than I think we ever thought we'd see in this county. Not a bad thing. There's a lot of good things happening, right? And we already talked about it being inflated because of the wonderful tower project that the sheriff has going on. 24 is going to be an anomaly for that budget. And we're just going to have to remember that. If everything is approved tonight, your total expenses for general fund would be $32,555,956. Revenues would ultimately match that with use of fund balance. Okay. And that would be using 5 $1,217,661 of fund balance. And again, you've already committed just over 3.4 million of that fund balance to the sheriff's office and correctional facility project. Next board meeting, we'll be looking for you to commit that couple $100,000 more that we need to make that 3.6 million in 2024. Or maybe we'll just do the whole rest of it. Huh? Yeah. Are there any questions about what's changing in that budget from what's out there? And this is why we've extended the process, right? I'm so glad that it's out there for people to take a look. We need you to take a look. Another thing changing, Clerk Lux came to me. She had just gotten back from conference and had learned from Secretary of State, I suppose, that they are now using a different kind of paper for all our certified copies. Clerks do not have a choice in the matter, literally going from like $150 a box to $1,500 a box. So in an effort to kind of try and recoup some of those increased costs, Clerk Lux is asking to make a change to her fee schedules that are in the proposed budget for 2024, looking to increase birth, death, and marriage certified copies from $15 for the first copy and $5 for additional to $20 first copy, $10 additional. Senior citizens 65 and over are currently $7 for first copy, $5 for additional. She's suggesting that go to 10 and 7. DBAs from increasing from $10 to $20 and passport photos from 15 to 20. Other than that, those would be the only changes to your budget that you consider for adoption in 2 weeks. Any questions?
I assume those fee changes covers that increase in
Correct.
cost for the paper. And is that a security thing with the change in paper?
Have us locked into, there's no choice.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we still are very low. I know I think it's Gratiot County. But I think they're like $26 for the first and 15 the second. So we're still way under our other areas around us, but same thing, waiving the period. Currently it's only, we can go up to 30. We haven't ever changed that. And that's just kind of a convenience thing for the applicants. And they can be out of state people that apply. So
What was the price for that paper again? Sorry,
$1,500.
change.
it went from like $150 for 8.5 by 11 to like $1,500 a box. And now it has our county seal on it with a raised seal with, if it gets wet, grand scan, void, it's some kind of souped up security paper through the state.
State's making a little money.
They don't give us a choice. We have to.
Oh, the paper's going up about 1,000%, and but our fees are going up $3, which is about 30%. Well, less than. So.
Well, I mean, it's a function of people aren't going to choose to go somewhere else for the service. You know, I mean, if we, you know, if their birth, death, or marriage certificate lies with the Isabella County Clerk, that's where they've got to go to get it. So this
Can
is
go to the
just-
state and get a copy of that, but it's $5 for the first copy. So
Like we probably won't know, right? If it's going to cover until we've got some experience with buying the paper and selling the licenses.
Well, I don't know, my math may be a little rusty being a biologist, but 1,000-fold increase in paper costs and charging 30% more per copy doesn't add up. We're gonna have to at least double these. And that won't match up pricing. But I think we should at least look at doubling. If it costs the county to, print a birth certificate for $90, maybe we should charge $90.
Oh, I think we actually should get.
Otherwise, we're having other people pay for your birth certificate that you're getting later.
That's right.
So.
Yeah.
I would say that we're not going far enough with the price if that's our price increase.
It's totally up to you guys. What do you guys say?
I think we probably need to sharpen our pens. It's not fair to, you're missing information, right? The piece we're missing is how many, right? What's the average number of birth, death, and marriage that we do? We'll apply those numbers and see, but to your point, we'll just sharpen our pencil and look. We'll let you know clearly before next Tuesday. I'm sorry, 2 weeks from now. If you're gonna adopt that budget, we'll let you know if that fee schedule changing again.
Good look into. Great.
Great point.
Mhm.
Point.
Other comments? Questions? Well, I don't think we need to move this on to tonight's meeting, but we had a good discussion. Mr. Chairman, that completes the work of the Finance and Administration Committee.
To Mr. Vice Chairman, we don't have any business for Criminal Justice and County Affairs, Human Resources and Public Works Committee.
Chairman, our first item, consider approving resolution number 2307, establishing escrow fees for a proposed DTE solar farm project. $15,000 and authorize the board chair to sign the same. And it's similar to the processes that we went through when we put in the wind turbines. There's essentially setting up escrow for special permit and site plan review on, and then on the second part, it's for review and compliance. And so the first part, which would be the escrow fees for special use permits, this is 105,000 estimated. And part is 10,000 for the compliance component of the estimate. And so that's why the total is $115,000 for the proposed solar farm that is coming down the pipe. Any questions or comments on that? Being none, that will be on our, oh, go ahead.
I would just add, I know in the committee, Mr. Newport noted that this time, this was our best guess. And that we could come back to the table if more was needed.
Yeah,
So I
estimate.
thought that was important to know.
Okay, sure. Yeah, because solar
Right.
farm, yeah, so,
Right.
but that's our best estimate, I have to say.
Mhm.
Okay, then, move on to the next item. It's consider approving agreement with Vanguard Fire and Security Systems in the amount of $2,046. Arthur, the board chair. Thank you. And we have Steve Marker here to give us the background on this.
Evening, everybody.
Hi.
Morning, Director.
Very simple and straightforward. Quote to fix the needed repairs at the Public Defender's Office during an annual inspection. They found a pinhole leak in our fire line for the fire department to hook into. It is under my threshold to normally sign for, but because there's a bunch of legal language attached to it, it needs a chair signature.
Any questions for Mr. Schumacher on that? Seeing and hearing none, we'll put that on our agenda this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 3. Consider approving DNR Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund Acquisition Grant, Meridian Park Acquisition Project. TF 21-0079 offer to purchase with addendum in the total amount of $100,000 and authorize the board chair to person to sign the same and to pre-authorize the board chairman to sign closing documents for property purchase. We have Alexis here. Alexis Hanson, Parks and Rec Director, to give us a lowdown on this, okay?
Hello. I am happy to be
Director?
here with what is the final stage of this
Yeah.
multi-year process of acquiring this property to add to Meridian Park. And just because I know it was asked at a previous meeting, I wanted to note that the acreage that this is providing better access to is a 24-acre section of the park, which is currently only accessible by a steep ravine. So for maintenance, or in the case of an emergency, it's problematic to get to that section of the park. So there's a history of getting an easement from the current owner. And it finally became an option to purchase some property there, eliminating the need for future easements. Back in February of this year, the board had kind of pre-approved a range of prices, allowing the previous director to negotiate a purchase price. And so finally, we are at the point where we have an offer to purchase signed by the sellers. And you'll also see in the staff report, there is an addendum to that offer, which clearly outlines the closing costs and the way those have been divided up between the seller and the purchaser. So as you can see in the staff report, the purchase price is $100,000, which was within the pre-approved range. And I did want to note that there is adequate funds for that purchase in the Parks Fund currently, and it should be happening in the fiscal year 23 window, because we have basically the closing documents ready with the title company pending approval at tonight's meeting. And so this is kind of the last stage of that project.
Any questions at this time?
No, just a comment, but I'm glad that we're getting this done. It's been a long process, but that's how it is sometimes. So.
It has, and thanks for speaking up, Chairman, because that reminded me, I just wanted to note that part of our recommendation includes a pre-authorization for the chairman to not only sign the purchase agreement, but to also sign all the closing documents. As most of you are probably aware, real estate transactions, things go really slowly and then they start happening quickly. So rather than coming back before the board when we have a scheduled closing date, we are asking for a pre-authorization for the chairman to sign closing statement and closing documents, which should be happening within the next week or two, hopefully.
That's good news.
Yes, very good.
Anything else? Any comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll put that on the agenda this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hanson.
Okay. Our final item is consider approving change order number 1 with JBS Contract Incorporated in the amount of $76,939 for the Commission on Aging Pavilion Project, and authorize the board chair to sign the same. We have Jennifer Crawford, Commission on Aging Director, to explain this to us.
Kind of long processes. So when our JBS went to go pull their permit with Union Township, we found out then that our original site plan did not include sewer and water. So we had to, so they couldn't get a permit. So we had to have the surveying company come back out. They completed another site plan, and that's been completed. And so now we're just waiting on another permit, but with the new site plan, it did create changes for JBS for hooking in, tapping into the sewer and water, and the process that they have to use that out there with our facility. So so that is the difference. So that it did increase the project by 76,939, bringing our total up to $543,488. And so I am requesting that we do approve this change. There will be another one. We will have the tap fees, which we're just waiting to hear from Union Township as to how much that will be to tap into the sewer and water. It is going to be completely separate from our building, so that if there are ever any issues, we will not have issues. Awesome. And hopefully issues. So.
Any questions or comments on this item? Okay, seeing and hearing none, we'll put that on the agenda this evening. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
And that completes the work of the Human Resources and Public Works Committee, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Marino. We have no intergovernmental affairs, no administrator controller issues, no unfinished business, no new business. Brings us down to general public comment. Is there anyone for general public comment? No one online? Have no one online and no one rushing towards the podium. So we will move right along. Announcements, commissioners, any announcements? Yes, Commissioner Engler.
Just, excuse me, just a reminder that this Saturday, the Isabella County Conservation District will be having their hazardous waste and electronic waste pickup at the Isabella County Parks. It's from 8 to 12, so.
All right,
The fairgrounds?
Yes.
great. Yeah, Commissioner Marino.
I say that I went to the Northern Michigan Counties Association. It was in Roscommon. And there was quite a lot of discussion about the coming statewide septic. And actually, the group decided that they were gonna contact the person that's putting this Representative Phil Shag from Kent County. Because they had a lot of questions about it and all that, about the time, who was gonna do the inspections, if there was gonna be any aid for the people putting in new ones and getting the inspections. And some of those questions actually were answered because Mac has a podcast that was in July and they asked the question, Representative Skag, and some of those issues were kind of dealt with. He mentioned that we were the only state in the whole union that didn't have a statewide code, that of the 64 rivers in Michigan, they have been certified that they don't meet the standards that they're supposed to for cleanliness, and all that. And so that was. And he also mentioned that 3 times before in the state legislature in Michigan, there was attempts to get this going, but it never happened. The other thing that he mentioned was that this probably will be put forward this fall, and that he will have committee hearings and all that to address people's concerns. Other things that were mentioned in the MAC report by Dina Bosworth was that there's probably going to be permitting for solar farms issued by the state, bypass local control things. And I understand why, because the state has a priority of net zero and they're trying to, I think it's now at 2030. But anyway, lots of the projects that were for alternative energy in the state have been stopped by townships over and over again, like Macomb or whatever. So not saying that I agree, but I just know why the rationale for this is coming forward. She also said that a lot of the agenda for the coming session, which has to be shortened because there's a primary coming up and the primary has to have a ratio from when the legislature closes until the primary can be. So anyway, that there'll be bills about labor reform and environmental reform. And so we should keep our eye out on what Mac's telling us is going on in Lansing, and I'm sure that'll be quite a few topics on that when we have the Mac fall conference. So, but I also encourage commissioners to check out those podcast 83s. They're really informative and answer a lot of questions and issues that we might have.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Adjourned.
Congratulations. Looks like we're gonna start the next meeting on time.